Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. We have the amazing Ted Pattinson here again today, doing another Dev Camp. I think this is the third one, right, Ted?
This is our number 3 Power BI Dev Camp session. That's right.
Fantastic, fantastic. And as you know, Ted works at Microsoft, and he is a program manager there with the CAP team. And my name is Kelly Kay, and I work with Power BI as the community engagement lead. And it is our pleasure to have you here today. We were going to start at 11:02, which is just about now, Ted. So I think we can start. What do you think?
It sounds good to me. Well, quick good day to everybody. So what we're going to focus on today is the Power BI JavaScript API. And definitely this is going to be a session where I want to cover a lot of ground, just to, so the video after the fact is a good resource. And there's about 30 different code samples I'm actually going to go through in this next hour. Now, if I remind you that if you go to Power BI Dev Camp, let me go ahead and move over to the browser. We have this little site here. And one of the things I'd like to do, this is just a little Power Apps portal that I've created, but if you navigate to this, basically the page for this session, you want to download the slides, you want to go to one of the sample apps, so I just wanted to provide links that were very handy. Now, the very first sample app we're going to look at is this thing which is called the Power BI Embedded Scratchpad app. So a little bit of background on this app. Let's get back here to my slide deck. And the idea of this application, it's a simple C# console application that basically programs against Azure AD to get access tokens and then programs against the Power BI Service API. And the whole idea is that we're going to build pages. Now, let's just before I jump into the material, let's do hello world. And the idea is with this application here, if I go ahead and run it, it's going to build a page. And more importantly, let's go ahead and shut this down. If I go back over here into live pages, here's the page it just created. Now, just to prove a point, let's go ahead and delete that. Let's go back over here. And now I'm going to go ahead and Control F5 one more time. So the whole idea is that, as I run this application right here, it builds the page and it puts the page inside here. Now, what I like to do is I like to demo by going and opening up this folder with Visual Studio Code. So here's the first thing that we have. And the magic about this sample is it creates an access token for you that's good for an hour. So now, you can basically just look at the page and make sure you understand how it works, but for the next hour, you can also start up the page and, you're going to get basically things working inside here. I might have messed up that page right there. So it's easy for us just to go back to this utility that I'm going to have. Okay, I'm not going to dwell on this utility too much longer, but the idea of once you've created that page there, I should now be able to go back to this tool and simply say open in default browser. Okay, and now we basically get an example of embedding. Okay, so here's basically the first sample that we're going to look at here. But because I want to look at many samples over this hour, we'll come back here and I'm just going to take my sample application and I can just now run it and generate all the pages that we're going to use inside of this hour. And so what I'll do is I'll uncomment all these things. And once again, this is a sample application where if you feel like testing this out, but now I'm going to go ahead and run this right here. And as I run this, let's go ahead and open up Fiddler for a second. And, as this runs, what you're going to see is that it starts calling the Power BI JavaScript or the Power BI Service API. And, the long and short of it is now we have, 30 different code samples we can look at. And we basically abstracted away, all the server-side stuff that gets access tokens and GUIDs. And now we can just focus on the client-side piece right here. Okay, so now you seen how the application works. We're going to go through several different sections. The first one is just going to be a look at the fundamentals of Power BI embedding. I take it that some of you might have done work with Power BI embedding before, some might not have. Those who have might have really drilled down. So let's just cover the basics. So the idea when you're using Power BI embedding is that you create an application and you have to call into Azure AD to get an access token. Could be for the current user, could be for a service principal. Now you call to the Power BI Service API, and now we get data back to the browser. So basically all the samples we're going to look at kind of assume that we already have things like the access token and it's back at the browser. And now all we have to do is write client-side code, against this one particular library, which is Power BI.JS, or what we call the Power BI JavaScript API. And so the idea is that once you get the embedding data back into the browser, you're going to write JavaScript or TypeScript code that's going to start embedding objects. And the embedded object is put in an iFrame and it directly connects to the service. Okay, now I want to point out that there's one really good resource, and that is there is a GitHub repo that Microsoft maintains that has the actual code for this API and has a great wiki. So if I go ahead and now let's navigate back here for a second. And now if I go back to this one location, here is the Power BI JavaScript repo wiki. And so most of the things that I've learned have just been by, coming to this particular repo and going down and finding things in the wiki. And you can see that they're continually adding new items inside here. So I'm not going to dwell much on this in this session. I just want to point out this is a very important resource. Now, with embedding architecture, this is important because your page is being served up from a particular place. In our case right back here, let's say that I go back to this, one test page that we made here. And what you're going to see here, if I can get this page unfrozen. Okay, finally it's unfrozen. Sorry about that. Is that I can go ahead and hit refresh. And the idea is that this goes through this loading process, and I have some code. If I kind of take a quick look at what is this code doing, it's basically calling Power BI Embed, and it's got this config object that gives it things like what type of embeddable object. Well, it's a report. What's the GUID? What's the embed ID? And then we also need an access token inside here. Now, in our case right here, one of the things that's tricky is that your code runs on the page, but yet the embedded object gets put inside of an iFrame that gets loaded from some wacky URL like wabi-us2-es2-redirect.analysis.windows.net. So in particular, your JavaScript code can't reach into that iFrame. Instead, Microsoft had to build a fairly convoluted library with a lot of low-level plumbing. Thank God we don't have to worry about it. We just kind of use the plumbing. But the idea is that your JavaScript code will be programming against things like report objects and page objects and visual objects. But yet, when you go ahead and you call a method, it has to be marshaled across these iFrame boundaries using this low-level post API code. Once again, if you don't know what the HTML5 post message API is, don't worry about it. It's stuff that you don't have to care about, but this library does some important stuff. And the idea is that you can call methods to start interacting with the report or dashboard that's embedded. And also, as that report loads in and finishes the rendering, it's going to kick back events as well, and you can handle those. Now, one other qualification I want to make just as we get going with these fundamentals is that it is, we have to split embedding into two categories. That which is user owns data embedding, and the second one, which is app owns data embedding. So when we embed as user owns data, we use the user's identity to get an access token and connect to Power BI and call the Power BI service. And we also just take that user's access token that we got from Azure AD and we pitch that back to the browser. And that is basically the security token that we use when we use embedded reports. Now, with user owns data embedding, every user has to have a Power BI license, and either your content has to be in a dedicated capacity, or every user has to have a Power BI Pro license. Okay, now, when we move to app owns data, this is more of the ISV model. One of the big wins here for ISVs is that Power BI and Microsoft doesn't know about your users. So you can have your own authentication store. You authenticate the users any way you see fit. But now, because we can't really use user-owns-data embedding, we use app-owns-data. And the idea is that generally you make a service principal, privilege call into workspaces to do your work. But what's kind of nice about that is that you can manage your users any way you see fit, and there's no need to license them or get them as your AD accounts. But what's important is when the app-owns-data embedding is used, you have to generate a special token called an embed token and pass that back to the browser. Now, here's the first demo we just saw. That was with user-owns-data. And so what you can see is that config object has the access token, and you have to specify the token type. So let's say that we come back here. Let's go ahead and take another look. Hey, things are looking great right here. Let's go back here. And let's say by mistake, I put embed. And what's kind of nice about this demo is I can just now save it, come back and refresh the browser. This content isn't available anymore. Yeah. And remember, with security errors, you don't get much detail because it's possible you're an attacker. So the only information you get back is access denied. So once again, you can kind of see that the token that you use is important. Now, another thing to note here. Let's go back and fix this. Azure AD, I'll hit save. I'll go back here and refresh the browser. One of the tricks that I like to show students is that when I embed a report, I'm just going to grab that report object and push it to the console log. And the reason I'm going to do that is that if I now come down here and we look at the developer tools, Control-Shift-I, what you can see is that there's this report object. And now you can start kind of getting an idea of things like the report object is a JavaScript object that you can get a hold of, inside of the developer tools and start looking at different aspects. Okay, now as we keep going through here, next thing I want to look at is app-owns-data. Now, when you have app-owns-data, we have to do some things in the code that calls to the Power BI service. And in particular, we have to create something which is called an embed token. And so inside of these server-side APIs, I have things like generate token request, and then for reports, generate token in group async. And the idea is that this gives you back the embed token that you then pass to the browser. Now, I don't want this session to drill into embed tokens, but I just will point out that we have a new version of the .NET SDK version 3. And they introduced, we're really bad with our versioning names, but in V3 of the API, we released a V2 way to get embed tokens. So if you're using the older V2, you basically go through reports.generate token. But if you move to V3, there's now a token.generate token. And the benefit of moving to 3 is that you can create embed tokens that have more than one resource. You can create an embed token that has one report and 3 data sets. And we're going to kind of see an example of that a little bit later at the end of our session. Now, when you get that embed token, everything works the same. We just basically have the token type, as embed, instead of Azure AD. Now, you can also embed a dashboard. I'm not going to go ahead and demo these, but they're there in the code if you want to go through and look at how to embed a dashboard. If you want to embed a dashboard tile, we have type tile as well. And when you embed a tile, you have to specify, what is the width and height of that particular tile. And then also you have the Q&A experience. Maybe I'll demo this one. So let's go back here. And, here is the Q&A experience. And so we're going to configure the Q&A. And so let's go ahead and open this in the default browser. And it's not very exciting until someone types in a question, unless, of course, you seed it with a question. So let's go ahead and hit save. Let's go ahead back here and do the refresh. So now here's my custom application where I'm going to bring up this, basically Q&A experience inside here. And it takes a second, but then, you can see that the user can start vamping inside here. And, maybe we'll switch it to a bar chart, or a pie chart. Okay, so, once again, it's all about, Microsoft's Q&A experience, and how you can leverage that through Power BI. Okay, one last thing in this intro section is that Microsoft has put a lot of time into something which is the Power BI embedded playground. I wanted to put a URL here. I wanted to kind of show my demos all hour, so I wasn't going to show their demos, but just to point you to it, if I go to this one particular URL, what you can see here is that there's a playground, and if I go down to showcase and I want to do things like report or do something with report layouts, and now I can come down here, and as I click, it's doing interesting things with Power BI embedding and the JavaScript API. And if I click on get code, I can basically start looking at the code. So once again, I just wanted to point this resource out because I've learned so much from it, and I definitely think anyone who cares about Power BI embedding and mastering it is going to get a lot out of the embedded playground. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So let's say I want to build an interactive experience. Excuse me. So what is nice about Power BI embedding is it's not just for consumers, but one of the things that you're able to do, let's go back here. Let's go ahead and move down to edit mode, and let's go ahead and open this up in the browser. And so note that you can, in your custom application, if you're using App-Owns-Data, this is a user that has no Microsoft account, but yet you're giving them the browser-based, report building experience, and they're able to move through here. They're able to add pages, they're able to add visuals to pages, change existing things inside there. So once again, it's a pretty neat facility, for them to be able to give us that. Now, one thing that you'll note is, let's go ahead and go down here to custom toolbar. Let's say that I really wanted to build a neat experience. So what we're going to do is we're going to say config, I want to have a report. Now, let's say at first we won't open up in edit mode. We'll open up in view mode, but we'll give permissions all. So we're basically giving this user the permissions to hide things. Now, we have different panes and bars that we can set. So let's go ahead and open this up inside here. And so let's say the first thing I want to do is, maybe I really hate this stupid filters pane. What does the thing do it inside here? So, note that the filter pane can be toggled on and off. And same thing for the bookmarks pane. So when you bring up a report, you can bring either one up or you can hide it. So, once again, if you look down here, you can kind of see here are the panes. Here's how you're able to set them up. There's also something which is called the action bar. And you don't see the action bar until you move into edit mode. Now, let's look at a couple things behind these buttons right here. So let's say toggle edit mode. So notice that under report, I can call switch mode and just pass edit or view. And the idea is that now I can just switch the user between edit mode and view mode. And note, when you're in edit mode, Power BI embedding now provides this thing called the action bar. And if your application doesn't want the action bar because it just provides things to users you don't want them to have, the action bar can completely be removed. Okay. And also what I find is, as you have some experience and someone's looking at a report and then they bring up that report in edit mode, quite often you're going to want to give them a full screen capability, so they're able to use the whole screen, as they're editing inside here. So once again, if you look through this code here, a lot of what we're doing is just calling report update settings, to hide and show different screens, and something like full screen, just the report object has a full screen inside there. Now, there's an issue with this report. I'm sorry, I'm going to move now to creating new reports. So we talked about report panes. I walked through this embedding with a custom toolbar. Another thing to note is that we have quite a few customers ask, when I bring up that report in edit mode, by default, it shows save and save as. What if I want to only show one of those? And it really kind of comes down to permissions. So if you have models.permissions.all, someone opening the report will see both save and save as. However, if you set permissions to read write, you'll give them save, but not save as. And if permissions are just copy, you'll give them save as, but nothing else.
Awesome. Hey, Ted, since you're on permissions, there is a question on how to handle RLS, row-level security, using App-Owns-Data. And then we have one other question as well, if you wanted to address those now.
Yeah, we're going to cover row-level security at the very end. So I probably should, I don't want to jump the gun on that. Definitely, there's a way to do it, and I plan to cover that. Microsoft recently released an API specific for React and Angular being developed. There are plans to create a sample of an Angular component like the React component. I don't have any timelines to give you, but I can say that work is currently, being planned. Okay. Now, let's say I want to embed a new report. So if you want to embed a new report, let's go back here and kind of take a look at this next sample here and embed new report. Let's go ahead and bring it up. And you can see that this gets to be really easy, except you don't point to a report, you have to point to the data set. And then someone's able to work with this. Now, let's look behind the scenes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back, into Power BI. I'm going to go back into the workspace, that has that report right here. Okay, and now let's go back to that particular user. And, for that user, let's create something simple. We'll take sales revenue and year, and, that's great. That's enough for the report. And so let's go ahead and do a save as. So what you have right here is a new report sit on top of a data set. So I'm going to say save as. And so as I do a save as, let's go back to Power BI. And what I am trying to point out here is let's go ahead and do a refresh. And you can see that the report got created. However, there's a problem because it's not the new report that you're looking at here. It's not the save report you're looking at. It's the new report. So what we need to do is we need to do a little extra work. So what we have here is a save as redirect. So let's go ahead and open this one right here. And so this time we're going to do the same thing. And that is, if I come back here, and this time we'll do it by product category. And let's now go down here and do a save as, and we're going to do a save as BBB. And what you're going to see here is that, if I go ahead and click save, we have an event that fires. So let's go back here. And so what you're going to see is that we have the new report. Okay, I'm sorry, let me get to a place. I'm going too fast. Okay, so we call create report, we create a new report. And now we're going to tap into the saved event. So the idea is the saved event just fired, and so it passes me this event. If I go back here, you can basically see that, when a report is saved, you get things like the report object ID and the report name. Now, because it's a new report, there's no original report object ID. But if you did a save as on an existing report, there'd be the new GUID and the old GUID as well. And you also can tell it the saved as flag. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to take the information. We have the new report ID, and we're going to go ahead and embed that. So now we've kind of switched over, and now we're actually dealing with, the saved copy of the embedded report. And what's important about that, and I'll try to finish up this demo before too much longer here. Let me go ahead and hit refresh. And, here's that report. Let's go ahead and open it up. Let's go back to my user who now can go, back into edit mode. Let's go ahead and just make a change here. And what I want to do is just verify that this user, let's go ahead and save for purple. Let's go ahead and hit save inside here. And now, what we should be able to do is verify if we go back here, that indeed my save was, pushed back inside there. Now, I think I did mention I was going to go through a lot of stuff, so I just want to work through. But that was a pretty common scenario that we see people who want to have builders, using Power BI in their environments. Now, you can also do things like load in reports with transparent backgrounds. Maybe I'll just go ahead and just demo through the next couple. So if I'm looking for a transparent background right here, I'm going to have something where, let's go ahead and open this in the browser. And so as I work on this one right here, okay, here's the transparent background. And what you could see is that if you have a solid background, you don't see anything that comes through. But once you have a transparent background, you're going to basically have to the left and right off the report, it's going to show the transparent background, whether it's a solid color or I have of an image. And also note, let's go to a couple other pages right here, that by default, pages have a white solid background. I mean, visuals do. So you might have to go to visuals and set the background to transparent, to make the whole thing go through. But here's just an example right here. And you can see that the visual down here on the bottom is transparent. The one on top is not. Okay. And the other thing to note is that if you go into edit mode, there's no transparent background. Transparent background is a feature that only works when you are in view mode. Okay. Now, let's say I want to apply a theme. Here are a couple interesting themes right here. And so down here, notice that part of the config, you can add a theme. Also note that there is a report apply theme. And I think if I just kind of give you a quick view of this demo right here. So if I take, okay, once again, like my screen's freezing up for a second. Okay, let's go back to apply theme. Let's go ahead and open this up. So the idea here is that, you're probably not going to change themes dynamically. I mean, you could, but probably you'll have a theme, and you could have a theme that you load in at runtime. But it's just another element that you can control programmatically. Now, we have something which is called contrast mode. So contrast mode is when we have something where we're going to set contrast mode, and it's generally for people who are visually impaired. And just to give you a quick, sense of what it is, here's a regular report. But if you have someone who has a bad screen and they're visually impaired, I can go into high contrast 1. I can go into high contrast 2. So these are just all built in. And it turns out that anyone that, is building visuals within Microsoft, every visual has to have a contrast mode implementation. It goes towards, making your Power BI reports more accessible, that for certain users that need it, you're able to go into high contrast mode. Okay. As we keep going down here, one more thing we'll see in this stream of demos, and that is you're able to load in a locale. So for instance, here's the settings, and I have locale. And so as I load in, look at over here on the left-hand side. Now, note that my Power BI report itself is not localized. So what I wanted to show in this demo is just the elements that are part of the report design. So if I switch to Spanish or German or Chinese, now Power BI is beginning to support localization, but it has a long way to go before it's going to be straight ahead. But you can see even things like maps, can basically change over. The other issue with localizing reports themselves is that it's only supported today in Power BI Premium. But I just wanted to kind of basically show that if you have reports that are written, in a particular language, make sure you load them with that particular locale setting so everything else, loads in correctly. Okay, now the next thing that we're going to look at is starting to work with events. So the first thing I want to do is let's look at this event logging demo. So here I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring up the control panel here, or the developer tools. So inside of this demo, what I wanted to do is I just wanted to take every single event that made sense and call into the console and basically just notify the developer that this has been fired. So one of the things that you can see is if I just load in this report, I have things like page changed. When you hit a page to begin with, the page change event fires, then loaded, and then rendered. And it's also possible for you, if I go back here, to basically say settings, visual render events. So you won't get rendered events for each individual visual unless you add this setting inside there. It's going to basically take up some performance. So if you need diagnostics testing or something else, but now let's say that I'll clear this and let's just move from one page to another. And by going to page 2, page changed renders, and then a visual rendered for each visual, and then rendered for the page fires inside there. Okay, now what I want to do, I'm going to move up through some of these slides that I've already gone over the topics for. And now we're going to start looking at not just events, but what's some of the functionality that we commonly build into our applications, once we understand how events work. Now, there's one other syntax thing I'm going to look at. So let's say that we want to handle the onloaded event handler. Okay, so I come back up here and I say report onloaded, and the second argument here, I pass a function to. Okay. Then I call report.getPages, and it is an asynchronous method. So the idea is when I call report.getPages, then, I have to basically pass the callback function inside here. And now I've got the pages and I can move through. Now I'm going to introduce you to a new syntax that you might not have used. And that is JavaScript, kind of like .NET and C#, now support async and await keywords. So the idea is you're able to use this new keyword, which is await. So, what you're going to see right here is that if I go ahead and I want to call await, you can't do that unless you mark your function as asynchronous. Okay, it works in all browsers except for IE. So that is, one of the reasons that some people haven't gone to that because they haven't pulled the Band-Aid off yet and gotten rid of their, IE user base. But obviously it gives you a much more straightforward way to write because it just kind of turns the asynchronous method, into a synchronous method to make your code, much more logical. Okay, now let's look at custom page navigation. So let's say that I want a custom page navigation scheme. So let's go ahead and open this thing up. And so what you can see here is that we're going to say onloaded. We're going to say pages await report get pages. And I get back these pages before we keep moving. And now we're going to enumerate through these pages. And I have code here that kind of builds in the navigation links over on the side. And then when someone clicks on one of those, I'm able to set that to the active page. And I guess one other thing to note here is that if you're going to have custom navigation, you want to get rid of the page tabs, from the UI. So here's something where a user can simply, navigate, up and down the pages with whatever navigation scheme, I'd like to give them. Okay, now also very similar. Let's look at the same thing, but with bookmarks. So let's go back to my report. And if I go back to this report, let's go ahead and open up the wingtip sales. And as I open that in edit mode, and then, we decide that we would like to, go into the mode where I can basically see the bookmarks. Okay, let's go ahead and bookmarks. And you can see that, here's kind of the, new UI experience, but people create bookmarks, so they can basically navigate place to place. Another common reason people like bookmarks is once you create bookmarks, you kind of determine the flow through your report. So it gives us kind of storytelling if we go into this bookmarks mode. So let's say what we can do from the Power BI embedding perspective. Well, just like we can get the pages, we can get the bookmarks. So I can say report bookmarks manager get bookmarks. And here, we're going to build the exact same, UI. So down here, now someone can build the bookmarks, and now they can start moving through and utilizing those bookmarks. What's kind of neat about this is that if I'm the application builder, I don't have to worry about the bookmarks. They're maintained by the guy who's building the PBIX file, that I'm embedding from. Once again, so bookmarks are very, usable in common scenarios. Now, let's say that I have bookmarks, but now I just want to bring up the app in play mode. So let's go back here. Let's go ahead and bring this one up. And now what you see here is, this one looks, very different. Another nice thing about embedding is it kind of adapts to whatever size that you have here. But now kind of look at the experience, that the user is just kind of going through the bookmarks in play mode right here. So once again, this can be a pretty beneficial way to do things. Okay. And then let's look at one more thing to do with bookmarks. Here's something that doesn't come out of the box. How about we just create a little carousel? And the idea here is that when we bring up this, I'm going to wait some interval. Because it's a demo, I set it to 2 seconds. But the idea is it just goes to the next bookmark and the next bookmark. And if we kind of look at, the code that we have beside here, it just basically has a list of bookmarks and applies one and goes to the next, and goes to the next. And when it gets to the end, it just kind of goes around, back to the beginning. So once again, pretty neat things that you can do with bookmarks. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and look at custom filtering. So here, what I wanted to do is kind of show a simple example where, I can create a filter, but the filter doesn't live inside the report. It lives outside the report on my page. So what you'll see here is that, I have some convoluted jQuery code that fills up the UI with all those different states, but the idea is that when someone goes ahead and basically makes any changes, we call set filter. And then what set filter is going to do, it's going to build a basic state filter. It's going to say in, and then I'm going to pass it an array of states. And then we just call basically, report set filter. If I go back here, and let me go ahead and bring up the tools right here. But what you can see here is that, each time something happens, we're applying that filter inside there. And then you can imagine that it comes up with, unlimited ways for you to, be able to give people, options for filtering, anything that you can imagine, you're able to do. Okay. So we looked at navigation with pages, with bookmarks. We looked at bookmarks play mode, another interesting thing for consumers that just need to go through the report and see the basics. And we looked at that bookmark carousel, maybe something for the lobby, the screen in the lobby as clients are coming in waiting for meetings, something like that. Okay, and then we also looked at implementing a custom filter experience. Now, next thing we want to talk about is something which is called phased embedding.
Hey, Ted.
Yeah.
We do have a few questions. Do you mind if I read a couple out to you just before we go on, and maybe we can deal with them later or now if
yeah, okay.
Okay. We've got, can you interact with the data from Power BI reporting JavaScript? For example, have your own JavaScript table of data based on the filters in the report. I think we did something similar just now.
Okay, and then I see a question, what about personal bookmarks and app-owns-data? They're not going to be supported.
Exactly.
Personal bookmarks are only going to be for user-owns-data scenarios.
Right, and then we also have a licensing question. If
the user does not own a Power BI license, is that one?
Yeah, that's the one.
If the user does not own a Power BI license, where does the user save report go? Does the user have a workspace? And the answer is the report just goes into whatever app workspace you want it to go in. The user doesn't need permissions. So basically, App-Owns-Data, you generally run as a service principal, who is admin of any workspace that you're dealing with. So you will basically have permissions to write things inside there. And the idea is that while the service principal is all powerful, when you create embed tokens, you constrain them to only give that user the permissions that they need. So the embed token, once again, when I get to the end, I'm going to talk a little bit more about security inside there.
Awesome. And that answers Frederick's and Anonymous's question on the pro license there. And then Lawrence has a question. Need a drill through with just one click directly into the chart on my app with my own data. Activate a button after the click is not an option for me. Can I deal with events with Power BI embedded using Power BI JavaScript API? And then we also have another question about personal bookmarks in the App-Owns-Data.
Yeah, see, that's I think the question was a little bit too elaborate to I'd have to ask more questions to give a good answer to that. So
hey, Lauren.
Maybe you could just, whoever asked that question, could you put a more detailed question or inside the chat window? Maybe at the very end, I'll take a little bit more time to give you a thoughtful answer.
Thanks, Lawrence. That's you.
Okay, Lawrence, yes. Or you could just deal with me directly, send an email to me and I'll try to help you out. Now, with phased embedding, what we're going to do is we want to do some things before the report is shown to the user. So phased embedding is not a optimization. It gives us functionality. So the idea is, instead of calling Power BI embed, I call Power BI load. The loaded event still fires, but nothing is going to show. So here's an example of, being able to say, hey, I want to go to a page of a certain name. Let's go ahead and set that page. Let's go ahead and put a filter in place. And now down here, you can see that we can add a couple configurations. And then at the very end, we call render. So the idea of phased embedding is you basically just want to do some things, and then you want to decide when that report, is shown to the particular user. Now, there's something else we can do, which is called white label loading. So the idea is that when a Power BI report loads in, people can see the Power BI logo and they know Ted didn't do all this stuff, Microsoft did all the cool stuff. Well, I want to fool people. I want people to think, that I built this whole reporting infrastructure myself. So here we're going to use Power BI load, but now what we're going to do is we're also going to hide the embed container until we get to the end of the particular load event, and then we're going to explicitly call render. So let's go back here. Let's see what this looks like. So let's go ahead and open this up. And now what you can see is, it doesn't show, the Microsoft logo. It shows mine. Okay, I don't really like that image so much. Let's say if I go ahead and change that to number 2 and hit save, that's okay. Let's say we go ahead and switch to number 3, and now let's go ahead. Oh, that's much better. Okay, that's the cat running around in the dryer, as your loading icon. But the whole idea is that you just want a white label, so you don't want your users to see Power BI, during the loading process. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is a true optimization. So there's something which is called bootstrapping. So what you're going to do is you're going to find a div on the page and you're going to call Power BI embed, and that's going to create an iFrame and it's going to start downloading a bunch of JavaScript. So the whole idea of bootstrapping is that if you don't have everything you need for embedding yet, but you can initialize the div and create the iFrame, we're going to save some time. So imagine that the first part of this code right here, from here to here, runs at application startup. And so the idea is that we call Bootstrap. And once again, it creates the iFrame and it downloads as much of the generic JavaScript that doesn't change from one report to another. Now, assume that we did a Bootstrap, and now in order to get this, we have to call across the network and wait for something to come back. And the idea is that the iFrame takes a little bit to initialize, so you might as well get that work out of the way while you're waiting for something to come back. And then after the Bootstrap, all we're going to do is call Power BI embed, And once again, Microsoft will, recommend bootstrapping, as one of the primary optimizations to make Power BI embedded reports load faster. Okay, how about a couple menus? So let's say I want a custom menu. So I'm going to go back here and we'll go back to our custom context menu. You can see down here that under settings, extensions, I want to add some commands. And notice that I like mine on top. So if I go ahead and I run this right here, and now we come back here, you can kind of see that, I put my custom menu up top here. Also, let's go ahead and I'm going to bring up the console window, and let's go ahead and actually invoke that. And what you'll see here is that when a menu command executes, it's just command triggered, and they give you command.detail. So what we're able to do is get, what are, what is the visual, what is the report, what's the page. Now, when you look at this menu right here, that's an options menu. Also note that in addition to an options menu, we have a context menu. So the idea of a context menu is I'm going to go up here, I'm going to go ahead, right click on Spokane, and there's that custom thing. And now, what you'll see is that, hey, there's your data point. Or I come back here and I pick Washington and North Carolina and Virginia, and then custom command. And now we basically have, 3 data points inside there. So what you can see is that the custom command is going to give you the information that you need about that underlying data. Now let's look at a scenario. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a custom command for exporting data. Now, before I do that, let's go back to this for 1 second. And still waiting for my machine to respond. Come on back. Okay, so what I am looking for here is that if I bring down this menu, well, there's my menu, but there's export data, show as table, spotlight. What if I don't like those menus there? So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and hide the menus, and you're able to do that, with this section up top here. Okay, so let's see an example. And that is, we'll go back here, and now there's the custom export menu. And here, when I get to the custom export menu, you can see here that we've gotten rid of those other menus. For this guy right here, that's the only menu that we have. Okay, so we can hide menus. Now, what I'm going to do here is, let's say that I want to have a custom export. So what's going to happen when someone clicks on this command right here? Now, what you're going to see here is that for the custom export command, what's going to happen is we're going to get the page name and the visual name. Now, what's a little unfortunate is that when this command fires, they don't give you the visual object, they give you the visual name. So then you have to enumerate through the pages and visuals and get the visual object. And so a lot of this code is kind of tricky because it's getting the report pages. And then once it gets the report pages, it gets the page visuals, it goes through. And once it finds the one of the proper name, now what are we going to do? So what we're going to do is we're going to get the data. And the way that we get the data is we call target visual export data. And you can either have underlined data or summarized. And the idea is that now I have the data. And so a little code here is going to kind of help me. And so let's go back here. And what you see here is I just kind of created a simple piece of code that I can now walk up to any visual, and it just kind of downloads as a CSV file. Or I come to this guy right here, and once again, export custom visual. And now, here is the data inside here. Okay, I know it's getting on in the hour. Still have 3 or 4 more important demos, but that was just something that I found a couple customers finding pretty handy is having a custom export command. So now that we're going to talk about report layouts, one of the things we have to do is come to terms with the fact that we have very ugly names for pages, and for our visuals. In particular, let's go back to Power BI, and I go back to my report. And as I go to this particular report right here, one of the things that you can kind of see is the report name or the report page name at the end. If I go here, and one of the things that I think's unfortunate and very sad is that we as developers have no ability to change these names. They get created, they're gibberish. Sometimes they're only half gibberish, report section and then gibberish, but you have to basically know what these things are. And then also you're going to have to know the visual names. And visual names are created with no rhyme or reason, but still we have to add them inside of our code. So there's this one page called the Visual Inspector. Let's go ahead and open that up. And what you can see here is I just enumerate through every page and then every visual so I can spit out the name and say what type it is. And I also added a little something to this demo so that if I click on Add Visual Table, it'll give you kind of a quick way to load that into a CSV file. So now we know what the names are. Okay, so first thing we have to do is we have to figure out, how to get the names of our pages and visuals for some cases. So now let's look at how to embed a single visual. So you have to know the page name. You have to know the name of the visual itself, but now I have a config and I have visual. Let's say that I go back here and we go to import a single visual and we go ahead and open this up. Okay, and there's a single visual. And you can kind of see I have code to take the visual, and resize it. And that all works pretty well. So if all you want to do is embed a single visual, nothing could be, easier than that. However, there's a gotcha. And that is we see customers occasionally saying, hey, I want 3 visuals, on this page. So they'll use embed a single visual 3 times, which turns out you're really loading the whole report, or at least the whole report page. So if you're going to use this technique, we recommend doing it, once per page, so you don't double load or triple load the same report, in behind a page. And sometimes people start with embedding a single visual, but then they want to have more ability to add multiple visuals. So that is going to bring us to custom layouts. So let's look at the custom layout demo. So if I go to this custom layout demo, what I wanted to do is just kind of show you a couple different layouts inside here. And there's the default, there is mobile settings, and then I have some for custom settings. And once again, you need to know the names of your visuals and the name of pages, because basically they have to kind of go inside here. And note that you can use variables, as long as you put the square brackets around them. So let's go ahead and load this in. Okay, so here's a report, and here is the main layout, but let's go to custom layout 1. Custom layout 1 was basically saying, oh, for the map visual, let's go ahead and have it, take up the whole width of the report. For that other visual, let's go ahead and hide that guy. If you don't take any stand and don't configure a visual, it will show in its regular position. Okay, now let's look at number 2. So with number 2, what we're going to decide to do is we're going to say, okay, well, maybe I want the table, but in the default, the table's over on the right, but in this custom layout, let's take the table and put it over on the left. Okay, and then there's also the mobile layout. So if your report, has a mobile layout, and what I mean by that is that in Power BI Desktop or in the browser, if you added a mobile layout, you can go ahead and add that inside here, and it's just going to give you a much better, view here, to be able to look at that with. Okay, I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to go through these last couple demos real quick just to give you an idea of what they do. So someone asked about row level security. So when we use row level security, one of the things that we have to do is we have to generate embed tokens with effective identity. And the idea is that if you don't put an effective identity, inside the embed token, Power BI has no idea, why one user is different than another, doesn't have a username. And then the other thing is, if you don't have an effective identity inside your embed token, if the report is row level security enabled, it will fail. You cannot load a report, without creating an effective identity. And what you can see here with the effective identity is that with the effective identity, I can go ahead and specify one or more roles. Also note that when you're dealing with row level security, you have to also add the GUID to each data set you want to use. And then you can also pass a username inside. And then we go ahead and create that embed token. And if I go back here, I have a demo. And the demo is, I'll be the first to admit, a little bit contrived, because what I have right here is I have something where we're going to pass something back to the browser that we would never do in a real application. And that is, we're going to build a bunch of different embed tokens, one for all data, one that has just Eastern, one that has Western Central, and then one that has two. And we're going to pass all these back to the page. Okay, but the idea here is, let's go ahead and open this up, inside the default browser, is that, if I go ahead and load this with an embed token, that basically has a role that shows everything, I see all the data. And now the embed token just has the Western and the Central, and the Eastern. And when you create the effective identity, let's say we'll go ahead and put Central and Eastern, in that same embed token, and it works just fine. Okay, now there's something called the correlation ID. Now here's this problem. And the problem is that if I use user owns data, we can just look in the Power BI audit logs and see what the username is. When you use app owns data, even if you're using embed tokens with effective identity and a username, when you look at the user ID, it is the service principal. So Microsoft wanted to give ISVs and other people using app owns data a way to kind of correlate, what's inside of the audit logs with individual users. But once again, Microsoft has kind of put it on the shoulders of the developer to kind of add this in. So what I want to do here is kind of show, I'm going to go ahead and open this browser right here. And so what I wanted to show here is that when we load in the loaded event, you can get the correlation ID. And so here, just as a proof of concept, inside the loaded event, what you're able to do, is you're able to figure out who the user is. You're able to get the correlation ID. And the idea is that you need to then save this, to some type of database or some other medium. So then you can go back and correlate that user with specific events inside the audit log. Okay, last topic here, and this one's fun. So what we're going to show here is that we have a report, but yet the report isn't really happy, with its underlying data set. It's kind of like the Bachelor show. So what we have here is we have something where we have wingtip sales, and we have a report and it's built on top of this data set. But now there are two other data sets that have the exact same schema, just different records. And so there are three different GUIDs right here. Now, to make this work, a couple things. One is, inside of the Power BI service right here. And once again, this one is going to be for the dynamic report binding. So, one more second, I'm sorry. Okay, well, tell you what, let's just kind of get to the code here and run the demo. So the idea is that there's going to be three different dataset IDs. Now, also note that to make this work, this embed token has to be created with multiple resources. It has to have the report ID and the three different dataset IDs. But once we get that, I can just basically say config.dataset binding, and I can point this report to a different dataset. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this right here. And once again, it's a single report. And now let's just take the exact same report and direct it to a different data set, and then a different data set inside here. So for companies that are a little bit suspicious about row level security, because after all, if your row level security design stinks, or your model's so complicated that the row level security is really complicated, another approach is just creating multiple data sets, having the where clauses in place so it brings back the exact data. It's very easy to open up a PBX file to make sure that it has the right data inside. So this dynamic binding, is something else that, shows companies' promise of having a single report, yet many different data sets below it, but not having to maintain one report, per data set. Okay, so I think I've talked too long. A couple things I wanted to point out is that Microsoft is now starting to work on code to author, to basically create pages and create visuals. There's a link to that. I'd say this is a topic that's pretty early for Microsoft, so you have to write a lot of code to get there. But I think over the next year we'll make some pretty good progress into making code that creates a page and adds a whole bunch of visuals to it, a more mainstream task. Okay. We've got about 2 more minutes, Kelly, so I'm going a little bit over here. But one other thing we have is I have a sample application for you. And just to give you a quick look at this sample application, this sample application, I wanted to write just to kind of give you an idea of a real application written with Node.js and TypeScript and Webpack. And let's go ahead and take this. And if I go ahead and I run this right here, this is an application where it's all client-side code. Yeah, maybe if we come back here and bring this over to the side. And now we'll go ahead and log in. And one of the things that you can see, it goes through Azure AD. It then allows you to kind of switch, into different places right here. So you can see behind the scenes, once again, this is all client-side code. It's authenticated through the new MSAL browser library, which is for JavaScript and TypeScript clients. And then once you get to a particular place, being able to quickly, create embedded reports in the browser, move into edit mode, make changes, go to full screen mode. So I just kind of wanted to give you a functional app. And the last thing I'll point out about this is that since it is written in TypeScript, and we start moving, we can start doing things like strongly typing our embed configuration. So as you're starting to work through this, and being able to get kind of strongly typed access inside here. So that's another thing that, because we're using TypeScript and they've done a good job creating the TypeScript type information for the Power BI JavaScript API, that works out pretty well. Okay, so that was a quick demo. We talked about that. I'm going to leave off with next month for Power BI Dev Camp. We have another person I work with at Microsoft on the Power BI CAT team, Phil Seamark. He's going to come in and host this one. I'll just be a code monkey or something like that, but he's going to talk about working with a tabular object model and how to program models running both in Power BI Desktop and in the Power BI service. So that was a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that was a lot of stuff. Hey, Ted, where can we answer all of the questions? Where can we have all the questions answered? On the community? Because we can do a post there and have those answered there. I can just copy paste them. What do you think?
Yeah, did you? I could do a follow-up post, with the questions that we have here that, I have not been able to answer today. Does that sound like a good approach?
I think that's a fantastic approach. Everyone.
So you get the questions, you send them to me.
Yes,
I will then give pertinent, hopefully good, helpful answers, and then we'll post them in a blog post I'll make from the Power BI community.
Sounds like a plan. And let me say, I'm super, super excited about the next session. Very happy about today's. Thank you so much for doing these sessions, Ted. We really appreciate your time. and everyone's going to love Phil Seamark next month as well. So looking forward to seeing everyone next month. Thank you everyone for joining. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, everybody.